It's a beautiful day in Mount Olympus, and one goddess had already had a plan for today. Hestia, goddess of family, fire and the hearth, was sitting on a log near the main hearth and poking the flickering flame with a wooden stick in her hand. Sitting with her were other goddesses known as Athena, Artemis, Hera, Demeter, Hecate, Amphitrite, Persephone and Aphrodite. On one side was Athena, goddess of wisdom and battle, daughter of Zeus and one of the three virgin goddesses. She had snow-white hair flowing down her back gracefully like a waterfall with two small long braids at either side of her face, and beautiful sapphire blue eyes glowing with power and knowledge. She was wearing a simple white dress with some parts covered in silver armor with blue decoration. All in all, she looked beautiful and powerful at the same time. Sitting next to her was Artemis, goddess of the moon, hunt and childbirth. She had brown hair done in a high ponytail, and glowing hazel eyes looked strangely like the moon. She wore a simple knee-length tunic in brown for easier movements. Strapped to her back was a quiver filled with sharp arrows, and at her side was a hunting bow. She was happily munching as many cookies as possible with a satisfied expression on her face. Sitting opposite of the two was Demeter, goddess of harvest, daughter of Re and Cronus. She had brown hair which was tied in a bun and matching eyes. She wore a simple and civilian green suit with no decorating on it. Next to her was Persephone, goddess of spring, queen of the underworld, wife of Hades, daughter of Zeus and Demeter. She is a young beautiful woman with shoulder-length indigo hair and black eyes. She wore a black short dress covering her splendid body, but also showing off her milky white skin and perfect curves. The mother and daughter couple were having their moment together, talking and sharing stories. After all, Demeter is an Olympian, there isn't that much free time for her, while Persephone was tricked by Hades to remain in the underworld. On their left side was Hera, goddess of marriage, motherhood and women, wife of Zeus, youngest daughter of Re and Cronus. She is a beautiful woman with long silky blonde hair flowing gracefully down her back, covering her forehead and framing her face in the most beautiful way, and blood-red eyes, which made her beauty more exotic and otherworldly. She wore a short white silk skirt that only reached her mid-thigh, which had a slit on one side, revealing her long wonderful legs, and a white sleeveless Chinese shirt, showing off her milky white skin and stomach. The shirt had a large diamond hole where her above-average breasts are, which were covered by leather breastplate, but still reveal a generous amount of her wonderful cleavage. She also wore long white fingerless silk gloves with lavender decorating and a tiara with a big beautiful ruby gem in the middle and two white wings at either side of the gem. All in all, she was the very representation of beauty and elegance. She was rather calm and quiet, munching Hestia's handmade cookies at a slow pace while listening to Amphitrite's story about her husband. Amphitrite is a beautiful woman with long light blue hair and brown eyes, wearing a blue dress, which looked a lot like a sailor uniform. She was the goddess of sea and fish, queen of the ocean and wife of Poseidon. She had a frown on her face while talking about her husband with Hera, who was just listening with little to no interest. Recently, Amphitrite had found out that her husband had cheated on her again, and she wasn't happy at all. Sitting opposite of them was Hestia. The goddess of the hearth had midnight black hair that reached her mid-back and curly at the end with amber eyes which looked like orbs containing orange flames flickering here and now depended on her emotions. She wore a simple black nightgown that fitted perfectly on her beautiful figure. As always, she was poking the flame with her wooden stick, creating cracking noises in the air with a small smile on her face. Sitting next to her was Hecate. Goddess and Titaness of magic, ghost, mystery and darkness, took the form of a pale, young girl. She had short straight blue hair that came down to her neck with a fringe that covered her forehead. She wore most of the hair on the side of her head behind her ears, with some kept at the front and two long strands of hair on either side of her head that came down past her shoulders. She also had electric blue eyes. Hecate wore a white large cape over her white blouse and a big hat with a hat looking strangely like a triangle pillow. Leaning on her side was her magical staff in the form of a golden staff with 6 triangular rings dangling on a bigger triangular ring. She was quietly munching her cookies while staring at the campfire with her perfect poker face. Sitting on Hestia's left was her best friend, Aphrodite, who looked a bit lifeless today. She was the goddess of beauty, love and lust, daughter to the primordial of the sky Uranus, wife of Hephaestus and Ares' official lover. A young woman with blazing red hair that reached her lower back with 2 autumn leaves on either side of her head and ruby red eyes. She was the most beautiful goddess in existence, with only Hera and Mother Re could rival. She had milky white skin and a splendid figure which was gracefully covered in her pink long-sleeved shirt and pink short skirt with black stockings. Overall, she looked like a normal schoolgirl, with the only difference was her otherworldly beauty and natural charm. It's her usual appearance, but today, something was different. Aphrodite looked lifeless and heartbroken. She hadn't touched her cookies since the beginning of their usual meeting. "Why are you so sad, Aphrodite?" Hestia's warm voice and the unusual question draw everyone's attention to the goddess of beauty. The question seemed to break her out of her downcast thought as Aphrodite flinched. She hugged her knees closer to her chest, her body shaking, and some sniffing noises could be heard. She was crying. She answered shakily, and Hestia easily picked it up as a lie. She hugged her best friend and ran a hand up and down her back comfortingly. "I'd let it all out. We are here with you." Hestia whispered soothingly in her ear, and it only made the goddess of beauty cry harder. Everyone grew silent at the sudden change of event. Aphrodite wasn't someone who would cry her heart out when something happened. She always had a happy-go-lucky attitude and an immunity to insults. To see her this way was quite weird to say the least. Despite what people said, Hestia saw Aphrodite as her best friend, and she would do anything to get her out of this state. Hestia. Aphrodite's quiet whisper could be heard clearly as all the activities at the main hearth had come to a stop. "Am I just a plaything?" Hestia's eyes widened a bit at her broken voice and the question. To do this much damage on the goddess of love, who usually just shrugged off insults thrown her way here and there, she could only think of one person. The one closest to her at this moment. "Ares?" Hestia whispered angrily as her warm and cozy eyes of fire changed to dangerous flickering flames. The others seemed to get ideas and had various reactions depending on their relationships with Aphrodite. Athena seemed calm, but the goddess of wisdom had her eyes closed and her hand clenched tightly. Hestia could understand since Athena, like her, is Aphrodite's best friend. Despite their constant bickering about whatever their topics were, the two cared for each other deeply. Artemis was sharpening her arrow with a dark look on her face. The goddess of hunting was probably thinking up a way to castrate Ares with as much pain as possible. Artemis didn't like Aphrodite, but she didn't hate her either. She just held a grudge against men, especially one like Ares. Hera just sighed since she didn't know what to do about the situation. Ares was her son, but she didn't hold any love for that warmonger, since he was so much like Zeus. Amphitrite gave Aphrodite a few comforting words just like Hestia, since her problem was somewhat like her and Poseidon. Demeter and Persephone had stopped their conversation and were looking at Aphrodite with a mixture of worry and pity. Hecate had several blue fire wisps surrounding her frame, her eyes were closed, and not a hint of emotions on her face. "Ares, he doesn't love me. For millennia, sniff, he has been using me. Sniff, for him, I'm just a plaything, no more than a bitch, a slut for him to vent his frustration and need. Sniff, I'm no more than a plaything, sniff. He doesn't love me. He is just using me. He doesn't care for me. He's just like these people, sniff, no one will ever love me or need me." Sniff, Aphrodite finished as she clutched Hestia's chest tighter and cried louder, letting all her suppressed feelings out. Hestia let some tears roll down her cheeks as she continued to comfort her best friend. She couldn't do anything for now, but one day, Ares would hope he had never existed in the first place. She knew too well Aphrodite's pain. She was the goddess of beauty, love and lust. People said her beauty is a blessing, but Aphrodite thought it was more of a curse. Because of her beauty, men from mortal to immortal fell for her, but not because of love. They lusted after her beauty and because of it, she had never found her true love, her other half, her destined one. Her beauty was unrivaled, gods and titans fought for her attention left and right, which was the reason she was married to Hephaestus by Zeus, to cease the upcoming war back then. She had had sex with many men in the past, but she always remembered them. She remembered their names, she remembered her moment with them, and she remembered their love for her, even if it lasted only for a moment, even if it wasn't real. For as long as she existed, she had been finding her true love, and many failed relationships had resulted in her blind love with Ares. The god of war had come to her when she was emotionally weak and when he lusted after her beauty the most. Many relationships began with genuine love, but time could alter all of them. If even genuine love couldn't hold a candle against time, how would lust do? Even one with unrivaled beauty like Aphrodite and Hera couldn't maintain their relationships with their respective partner with their beauty alone. Aphrodite and Ares might have thousands upon thousands passionate nights together, but then again, when one achieved what they wanted the most, it lost its value to them. Ares was no exception. His lust for Aphrodite was strong at first, but when he had finally laid his hand on her, he grew bored as time passed by. Aphrodite had the power to sense love, but it could only work on mortal and demigod, so for millennia, she had been used by Ares and got ditched by the very same man afterwards. Hestia seriously pitied her best friend. Aphrodite would be a very good wife if she was married to the one she loved and loved her genuinely. But like some twisted fate, the goddess of love had never been loved genuinely. To be the goddess of love but never experience true and genuine love. Betrayed by the one she loved the most for millennia. Hestia honestly hoped nothing bad will happen to Aphrodite next. If not, the goddess of love might lose her final hope and fade away to avoid being in pain again. Silence reigned the main hearth for the next hours. Every goddess present there could only hope for the best for Aphrodite and gave her their blessing. Poor Aphrodite put her faith and love on that warmonger bastard, only to be betrayed by him. I hope she will learn a lesson to not love any man after this. Artemis said as she rubbed her temper. After several hours of constant crying, the goddess of beauty had fallen asleep on Hestia's shoulder, a peaceful expression on her face. Athena sighed at her half-sister's comment, not every woman had a grudge for men like her. Even Athena had some kind of love for man, and it shone on her brainchild she created through magic with the man she loved. You had never been in love before, Artemis. You don't know the wonderful feeling that family brings to you. I doubt you would ever know if you remained the way you are. Hera said with a sad expression on her face. Finding true love also was her problem, but first, she needed to do something to her marriage with Zeus. That bastard of a husband wouldn't just divorce her that easily. Maybe now, she can find her true love somewhere in this world. Athena said softly with a smile on her face, but then she sighed and continued with a sad expression. Then again, Olympus doesn't have a single faithful male god, and mortals included demigods can only live a short time. Athena finished with a tired sigh. She will find it eventually. Hecate's soft voice cut through the air like hot butter. The goddess Antigonus had a beautiful smile on her face as she said that. Her eyes were on her the moment she spoke her first words. What do you mean, Hecate? Demeter asked with a confused expression on her face. The Queen of Darkness just smiled at her before standing up and walking away. More and more blue wisps appeared and swirled around her frame with increasing speed. Hecate looked around one last time with a smiling face before she totally disappeared. Her words still linger in the air as the wisp started to dissipate itself. It's a mystery. It might just be a second, but Hera could swear that Hecate had given her a soft beautiful smile and a look full of joy and hope before she teleported away. I wonder what meaning is that? Duchan eagerly high-pitched voice followed by footsteps echoed through the hallway and reached the room of one person. The door swung open to reveal a small girl with brown hair flowing down her back with two pigtails on top of her head, one on each side. The girl ran to bed with her small foot and jumped onto it. A stirring noise could be heard as the lump on the bed shifted around for a more comfortable position. Duchan, wake up. Duchan. The small girl called out as she shook the lump covered in sheet with her tiny hands. The stirring noises got louder with every shake before a strong arm shot up and wrapped around the small girl tightly. Within seconds, the girl had been pinned down and tickled by a blonde man. "Pat you, Beatrice." A tall blonde man said excitedly as he tickled his daughter, eliciting a laughing storm from the squirming girl who was trying to break free from her father's grip. The father and daughter couple laughed together as they played with each other some more. It's still early in the morning, and the Uzumaki household had already made so much noise. Duchan. Stop it. The small girl named Beatrice pleaded with her father as she tried to catch her breath between her laughter. It would be a few minutes before the two decided to end their morning fun together and sat on the bed with a smile on their face. Sitting on the bed was a tall man with spiky blonde hair, two jaw-length hair's bangs framing his face, and cerulean blue eyes that held warmth and kindness in them. He wore white top with a red swirl in the center and black short pants for more comfortable sleep. What is different about him is his whiskers marks which made him look fox-like. Sitting next to him with her legs dangling excitedly was a small girl about 4-5 years old, with brown hair flowing down her back, two pigtails on top of her head, one for each side, and matching brown big innocent eyes. She was wearing a simple white dress with a red swirl in the center just like her father. Letting out a sigh, the blonde man scratched the back of his neck as he looked at his most precious people in the world. "Why would you wake me up so early in the morning, Beatrice?" he asked with a questioning look on his face. Hearing the question, the girl's eyes sparkled with childish excitement as she hopped on the bed again and swinging her small arms around as she answered. Duchan promised to go to the zoo with Beatrice today. He chuckled at the cute answer and gave Beatrice a kiss to her cute little nose before ruffling her hair, making the girl close her eyes in bliss. "Then, let's get ready, we will go right after breakfast. Today, I, Uzumaki Naruto shall escort you to the zoo of this humble city, princess." The blonde now identified as Naruto said dramatically as he bowed at his daughter, who just smiled widely before giving her father a hug and ran out of the room. "Hi. Duchan." Naruto smiled to himself and walked out of the room to do his morning routine before making breakfast for the two of them. Today would be fun, like always. Mount Olympus Aphrodite Temple. It had been a week since her emotional chapter at the main hearth, and Aphrodite was feeling better and better thanks to her fellow goddesses. She had been constantly visited by Athena, Hestia, sometimes Artemis and surprisingly, Hera. Athena and Hestia because of their worry, Artemis came to ask if she wanted to get revenge on Ares, which she kindly refused much to the huntress's disappointment. Hera just came to make sure she didn't abandon her duty. Ares had also come. Aphrodite Temple 2 days after the meeting. It was 2 days after the meeting and Aphrodite was sitting on her throne, thinking about her immortal life from the day she rose from a pile of foams which was Uranus's castrated genitalia to this day. Aphrodite sighed, thinking about the past only helped to sadden her even more. Her eyes narrowed when she sensed a familiar presence flashed into her temple. "Come with me, Dite, to my temple," a male voice said. Aphrodite turned her gaze to the door of her temple and saw him. He is Ares, god of war. Combed back red hair and flame-like eyes, he wore a red full-mail with flame decorating here and there and a fangs necklace at his neck. Confidently and arrogantly, he walked to the throne where Aphrodite was sitting and caught her hand only to be blown back by a blast of power. "Stay away from me," Aphrodite shouted, an angry expression on her face as she glared deathly at the red-haired god who was slammed into a pillar, causing debris and dust to fly everywhere. Standing up from her throne, Aphrodite walked towards the god of war, her hair shadowing her eyes, her teeth gritted together. A pink aura covering her frame and the wind swirled around her like a tornado. The whole Olympus shook as Aphrodite flared her celestial power. "You bitch, I come here to bring you back to my temple," Ares said slowly as he stood up, clearly not affected by the impact. "What do you think you are to decline my offer, huh, slut?" Ares said angrily. Aphrodite held her head down, tears slowly leaked out of her eyes and fell to the ground. Ares smirked and flared his own power. "Good, now go. Leave." It was no louder than a whisper, but Ares heard it clearly as he narrowed his eyes at Aphrodite, who was clenching her fist tightly, her red eyes shadowed by her hair and her lip a thin line, despite her falling tears. "You will come," Ares said again with his power flaring full force, thinking the goddess of love would submit to him only to be silenced as a huge blast of pure, raw power hit him. It was bigger, heavier and more powerful than the blast he received a few minutes ago. It could rival the power of the big three in raw power alone. A sweat appeared on his forehead and rolled down his face as he stared at Aphrodite, who was no doubt the source of this power. The goddess of love was staring at his eyes with her ruby red eyes with no emotion in them. It made his blood run cold. "Leave," Aphrodite said more forcefully as she narrowed her red eyes at Ares, who gulped and stepped back. Those eyes were the eyes of a warrior, no of a killer, a murderer. Seeing the usually laid-back goddess like this had reminded him of one thing. The one thing he had forgotten long ago. The one thing only a few remembered. Aphrodite is Uranus's direct descendant, in her veins flowed the blood of the primordial of the sky. Ares knew with this kind of power, Aphrodite could easily beat him or even kill him with little to no effort. Gods couldn't die, but there would be a long time before he reformed completely. Gritting his teeth, Ares decided to retreat for now. He would return one day and make him his bitch again, like she had once been. "I'll remember this." With that, the god of war flushed away. Aphrodite temple present. Dite, lost in thought again. A familiar voice said in her ear, startling the goddess of love. Aya. Too deep in her thought that Aphrodite had never noticed Hestia standing beside her the whole time. Seeing the black hair goddess, Aphrodite took a deep breath to calm her nerves, before glaring at the goddess mockingly with a pout on her face. "Moo. Don't do that again," Aphrodite said, receiving a chuckle from Hestia. Sitting down next to her best friend, the goddess of the hearth looked straight into her eyes with a worried face. "Are you okay, Dite?" Aphrodite grew a small smile at that, her friend always cared for her. "I'm fine. Don't worry," Aphrodite answered truthfully. She wanted to find love, true and genuine love, find her destined one and then live the rest of her immortal life with him. Ares' arrival the other day had only strengthened her determination to do just that. She held no love for him now. But it still hurts her a little. Hestia smiled softly at her best friend, that's the Aphrodite she knows. Decatur said you would find it eventually. Your true love. Hestia stated and calmly waited for her friend's reaction. Aphrodite was now facing her with mouth agape and eyes widened with a mixture of sadness, fear, but most of all, hope and joy. Sad because of many failed relationships which she believed was true love she had had before. Scared because she was afraid of being betrayed again. Hope because Hecate's words had never been wrong before and joy because her wish, her purpose of living would become true. Really? Aphrodite asked hopefully and Hestia nodded before she was engulfed in a big hug by the goddess of love which she wholeheartedly returned. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Aphrodite mumbled repeatedly as she buried her face in Hestia's chest. For the goddess of family, fire and the hearth, she was beyond happy since she could help her friend. By repeating Hecate's words to Aphrodite, she had given the goddess of beauty, love and lust some hope and the reason to continue her existence. She closed her eyes and thought about the future, where she hoped her friend would be happy, her sisters and brothers would be happy, and everyone would be happy. New York. The Uzumaki household was having a good trip to the zoo. There weren't many people today due to their work and business, and for that, Naruto was thankful. The blonde man was walking through various cages with different animals inside. Beatrice on his shoulder, looking left and right with sparkles in her eyes. Naruto chuckled, this day couldn't get any better. It's noon and the two of them had already visited half of the zoo. Beatrice was extremely happy at seeing various animals and plants. The little girl had wanted to bring a baby tiger home and named him Tora-chan, which made him sweat. Du-chan, look, it's Panda-san, Beatrice shouted excitedly as she pointed to a bamboo-filled area with several pandas inside. They were visibly unconcerned about human presence and just continued to do whatever they were doing. The small girl had taken a liking to pandas when she finished watching Kung Fu Panda. As always, Beatrice wanted to bring home a baby panda, and as always, her attempt failed. They spent about 10 minutes looking and feeding the animal before a large grumble effectively ruined the mood the family was in. Looking up at the small girl, the father and daughter couple grinned sheepishly at each other while scratching the back of their necks. "Ma, it's time for lunch." Mount Olympus, Aphrodite Temple. "What are you going to do, Dite?" Hestia asked while playing a card game with her best friend, Aphrodite. The goddess of love's face fell a little at that question. Even if the words were spoken by Hecate, the queen of darkness and goddess of magic, ghost and mystery, she was still scared. Like Athena had said, Olympus doesn't have a single faithful man. That left mortals and demigods. But those two can only live a short time. For mortals, a century might be long, but for a goddess like her, it's like a second. Seeing the one you love die before your eyes because of old age while you continue to live is painful. Don't know, Aphrodite answered depressingly. She believed in Hecate and Hestia, but she had good reasons for being so worried and scared. Past experience and many more. The goddess of love sighed when she realized that she had lost the game. Hestia smiled softly at her best friend. The game was interesting, but it seems that Aphrodite couldn't focus and had lost it. The goddess of hearth stood up from her seat and looked at her best friend, her smile still on her pretty face. "Why don't you go to Earth, Dite?" Hestia suggested, and Aphrodite seemed to ponder on the option a bit before she nodded. She loves the Earth, so maybe a trip down there will help her a little. Unbeknown to the two goddesses, this trip will change their future, especially Aphrodite. Entering the cafeteria nearest to them, Naruto waved at the waitress, making her blush, and called their orders. The father and daughter were happily conversing with each other about the interesting trip, with Beatrice happily dangling her legs and Naruto listening to his little girl with a content smile on his face. The two Uzumaki needn't wait long for their lunch to arrive. Beatrice had ordered a strawberry cake and a cup of milk for her. Apparently, the girl had a love for sweets, and her daddy had never failed in spoiling her. His daughter is just the sweetest and cutest thing in the world that Naruto can't resist. Seriously, how did she manage to learn that godforsaken technique with the name puppy eyes? He would never know. Naruto's lunch was pretty simple. 2 big hamburgers and a cup of cola would replenish his energy and last for dinner for him. Looking at his daughter, Naruto couldn't help but smile softly at her. "How is your day, Beatrice?" Really fun, Tu-chan. Though, it would be better if you agreed to bring home Tora-chan or Po-chan." Beatrice finished with a cute pout on her face, while Naruto laughed awkwardly. She wouldn't let it go by. Woody sighed, but smiled again when Beatrice continued to eat her strawberry cake. No matter what, seeing his daughter safe and sound always makes him feel like the happiest man in the world. As the little girl grew up, Naruto couldn't help but think about his deceased wife Krovia. Beatrice is so much like her mother that he almost had a heart attack, almost. Naruto let out a content sigh as he looked out the window, taking in the green scenery surrounding them. "She will grow up to become a beautiful lady like you, Krovia," he thought to himself as a lone tear escaped his eye and rolled down his cheek. New York a few minutes earlier. Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, love and lust, was here, in New York. After pondering on what to do in human realms, the beautiful goddess decided to have a bit of sweets at her favorite cafeteria somewhere near the zoo. She had tasted all the sweets this world had to offer, and so far, this cafeteria served the best. Aphrodite let a smile graced her face as she entered the cafeteria, ready to eat her favorite chocolate cake, when suddenly she froze. She had just sensed something. Something related to her domain love. Quickly looking around, enhancing her sensing ability, Aphrodite tried to pinpoint the source of this feeling, this power. For the goddess of beauty, love and lust, this source really is a goldmine. Love is her domain, her power and her existence. Without love, she couldn't exist. Without love, she would fade away. Time seemed to stop when she laid her eyes on a blond man who was looking out the window, taking in the scenery, and a little girl with brown hair. It happened just in a single second. All the emotions, all the love the man was radiating was so strong and powerful, so pure and so pretty. She blushed a little. So much love. For eons of existence, not once did Aphrodite meet such strong love radiated from a man, and a mortal at that. As the goddess of love, she can feel and read love power in the area around her. Like, how long will it last? How much love do they have? False or real? But it only works on mortals, demigods and lesser beings. Gods can't be affected by this power, which is why she couldn't read Ares' feelings about her and blindly love him in the first place. The cough woke Aphrodite out of her thoughts as a waitress asked if she was okay. Realizing she had been standing there the whole time, looking at a certain blonde, the goddess of love in mortal form walked to a table and called her order. Secretly, Aphrodite glanced at the table which was occupied by the blonde and the little brunette who she guessed to be his daughter, due to their difference in ages. She nodded, a little proud of herself for the right guess when she heard the girl called him Tu-chan, which is daddy in Japanese. How would she know? Simple, gods know all the languages in the world, and with an otaku like Apollo around, it's an understatement that she knows about Japanese culture. Taking a spoonful of chocolate cream that had just been delivered to her, the goddess of love sighed, a little depressed at the fact that was lying in front of her. Such a strong love radiated from a mortal man, and its receiver was no doubt a mortal woman. She truly felt jealous with the woman for receiving such strong love. It's so beautiful, so potent, so real, and from what she felt, it will last for eternity. Aphrodite sighed, thinking about it would just deepen her wound. Taking another spoonful of chocolate cream, Aphrodite stopped midway when she felt his emotions flickered. It changed from calm and cheerful to sad and nostalgic. Secretly, she glanced at the blonde again and used her other ability on him. She will grow up to become a beautiful lady like you, Krovia. Aphrodite felt her heart skip a beat at his thought and placed down her spoon. Now, she knew why the little family missed her mother. That woman, Krovia, had probably passed away or didn't live with them anymore. The goddess of love immediately dismissed the latter and went with the first, since just the most stupid woman in the world would decline such love from a handsome man like him. She had seen his face when he talked to his daughter about whatever their topic was, and she had to admit he is handsome. Aphrodite's face fell again. That blonde man, he still held great love for a deceased woman. It made her jealous and sad at the same time. Such strong bond exists between a living mortal and a deceased woman, Aphrodite thought sadly before she let out a dry chuckle. Her respect for the blonde just took up a notch. I feel so self-despite now. What goddess of love I am. Aphrodite let a lone tear roll down her beautiful face as she finished her cake. Placing the much-needed money on the table, she vanished from view without a trace. The mists covered her magic. She had much to think on what to do next. While the situation did little to help her recover from the pain she got from her false relationship with Ares, it did give her some hope to continue her existence, believing that true love exists. In some part of her heart, an image of her standing beside a certain blonde happily latched onto his arm, and a little brunette in front of them began to appear. She wants that image to be true, she wants to experience the feeling of being needed and loved. Maybe just this time. Olympus, Ares' temple. The god of war was having an episode in his own temple. He was enraged, ashamed, and frustrated. It has been a week since that day when he stomped into the temple of Aphrodite and was kicked out by that bitch. She is just a bitch, and she had the courage to do that to him, the god of war. With an empowered punch, Ares destroyed yet another stone pillar in his temple. He would use his power to fix it later, but now, he needed something or someone to vent his frustration on. Normally, he would use Aphrodite, that's what that bitch uses, a plaything to vent his frustration on. Don't think I'm scared of you, Dite. This world is constantly at war, even if it's just some skirmish. I'll regain my powers soon, and when that time comes, you will be licking my feet, begging to be my plaything again. The ha-ha. Ares' laughter could be heard across his territory on Olympus, making his servants think the god of war had gone insane. But that thought in mind, Ares flashed away, no need for Aphrodite, he would just use another goddess to vent his frustration on. He is the god of war and he will have everything he wants, even his father's throne. Olympus main hearth. It's a beautiful day in Olympus, and the goddesses minus Hecate are having their usual meeting at Hestia's main hearth again. Nothing much to say, they were just doing their own things while eating Hestia's homemade food. The goddess of fire, family and the hearth looked around, trying to locate her best friend Aphrodite. 3 days ago, she had suggested to the goddess of love to go to the human realm for a vacation or a break from work. Since then, she hadn't heard anything from her. There she was, seated on a distant log, looking up at the starry sky with a cup of tea in her hand. She had a small smile on her face as she took a sip and continued her stargazing. Many would think it didn't suit her, but for the goddess of love, looking up at the sky always calms her down a little, day or night, it is still the same sky. Being a direct descendant of Uranus has that effect. Hestia walked up to her best friend and offered some cookies, which the goddess of love appreciated much. The two sat together, side by side, gazing at the starry sky on Olympus. Colorful stars filled the night sky of Olympus, the highest place in the world. It's so beautiful that Hestia wondered why she could miss such a thing in the past. Beautiful, isn't it, Tia? Aphrodite asked softly, and Hestia nodded, looking at the Milky Way in front of them. The scenery almost made the goddess of fire, family and the heart forget her reasons for coming here. She shook her head and looked at her best friend with her amber eyes, which was burning very slowly and calmly. How was your trip, Dite? Hestia asked. The goddess of love smiled, her friends always cared for her. It's good, I think. Want to hear something? Aphrodite asked with a big smile and an excited tone which made Hestia smile. Why don't we share it with everyone? The goddess of love nodded at the suggestion and walked up to the group of goddesses, who all smiled when seeing the cheerful goddess returned. With everyone's attention on her, Aphrodite took in a deep breath and began her story about a handsome blonde she had met during her trip to the human realms. Aphrodite's trip day to New York. Aphrodite was stalking her target again, she had been doing that for a while now. The blonde was a big enigma. Based on his stance, the way he moved around, she was sure the blonde was a warrior. But that just raised another question to her though. People these days live in peace and harmony with each other. There might be some skirmish and small battles around the world, but still, those gun-wielding boys wouldn't have such a warrior-like stance. The goddess had also sensed his power and aura. Apparently, her stalking target is a demigod, a strong and experienced one at that too. He had done a good job in hiding and suppressing his energy the whole time. Today, she would make an appearance and try to befriend him. After all, love comes from the simplest relationship, which is friendship. This would be a hard challenge for her, though for the future of her love life, she would try her best. From the information she had gathered from various sources, the blonde is none other than Uzumaki Naruto. And to her surprise, he is an author and a chef. Maybe the chef was too much, owner of a ramen stand would fit him perfectly. His recently released book, Loveless, and its predecessor The Tale of a Gutsy Ninja, have been bestsellers of the year for a long time. Those two books even appear in Athena's Grand Library, which is where all the greatest books in the world from ancient time to this day reside. The Virgin Goddess had once stated that his novels, especially Loveless, are the most wonderful novels she had ever read. The god of sun, Apollo, whose domain also is poetry, had been very excited about the release of a certain orange book named Icha Icha, whose author is also Naruto. A mop of blonde hair at a corner of the street caught her attention. Her target had just walked out of a Japanese restaurant with a very satisfied look on his face. Beatrice wasn't with him. Chance. Aphrodite thought and took a deep breath to calm her nerves. It wouldn't do her any good if she made a bad first impression. She wanted to be loved and needed, not because of her beauty, but because of who she is. It's hard to find a man who loves and treasures his destined one genuinely, but now she had found him, she would take this gamble. After all, she had nothing to lose. At worst, another false love, another pain, another scar. But if he is her true love, her destined one, the one Kate spoke about, just the mere thought of it made her so eager and excited. Too deep in her thought, Aphrodite never noticed that she had been standing in the exact same spot the entire time, and her stalking target was standing in front of her, hands in pockets. "Lady, are you okay?" the blonde asked. He had just had lunch at his favorite Japanese restaurant and was ready to go home with some sushi for his daughter before he noticed this beautiful lady. She had been standing there, looking at him the whole time with an unreadable expression on her face. He could sense some power and aura in her, so most likely, she's a demigod. He didn't know what a demigod was doing here, since most of them decided to go to Camp Half-Blood for protection, and the power he sensed from her wasn't enough to protect her from high-rank monsters. The question pulled Aphrodite out of whatever her thought was and startled the goddess of beauty with the sudden appearance of her stalking target. She jerked, visibly surprised by his sudden appearance, her head slammed into his nose, knocking the blonde off his feet, and stumbled backward while she held her head in slight pain. "Ah, sorry mister." Aphrodite quickly apologized to the blonde and examined his nose, which had blood flowing out of them. She laughed awkwardly at the bad situation. First impression of a broken nose is great. "I'm fine, don't worry," the blonde said while nursing his nose. The impact was stronger than he had expected. He idly wondered if the woman knew how to make her head harder or not. But for another question, the woman was standing there, looking a bit worried, guilty and disappointed. He must do something. "Don't worry lady, I'm fine, really. I'm Naruto, by the way." "Uzumaki Naruto," he said with his hand outstretched and a welcoming smile on his face. Hearing the question, Aphrodite quickly stepped back to gain some distance between them and shook his hand while thinking up a good fake name. "Aitvenusa, nice to meet you Naruto-san," Aphrodite said cheerfully, hoping the best for this conversation. By the information she had gathered, Naruto is a man who loves his country even if he is here, in New York. That's why she addressed him in a Japanese way. Maybe, it would give her some advantage, or at least a decent first impression, second impression. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the added suffix to his name. He wouldn't care if she just simply called him Naruto. After all, he didn't care much about honorifics. Now standing at this distance, he could say that she was, no doubt, the most beautiful woman he had ever laid eyes on. He also noted that her skin was very smooth and soft too. The two of them stared at each other for what seemed like centuries before Aphrodite broke the handshake and turned around with a red face. Smoke came out of her head. Even if she had heard it more than 1,000,000,000 times, it would never cease to flatter her. He had thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever laid eyes on. She knew it due to her ability to read thought. It was cheating to know what people thought of her when love was supposed to be fair and square. She admitted that she would have an edge, but she wanted to be fair in love, and Naruto deserved it too. If she wanted, just a little magic could make him fall head to toes for her. But how can she call their love true if she does it? Aphrodite didn't want that. And so, she deactivated her ability to read thought and turned to face Naruto again. Her face is still a bit red from the mental compliment he unknowingly gave her a moment ago. "Sorry about your nose, Naruto-san, it was just you really surprised me back there," Aphrodite said a little guiltily. If she hadn't been lost in thought, the whole incident wouldn't have happened. Again, Naruto smiled at the girl, telling everything was okay. Aphrodite smiled to herself. Her target is a good person. If not, he would have asked her for money to nurse his broken nose or force her to do something for him. Then just as Aphrodite was about to befriend him and ask for his phone number, an earthquake occurred. It wasn't a natural earthquake from what she sensed. It had celestial power and a strong one at that. The sudden earthquake had made her fall forward and straight into Naruto's chest as he embraced her by instinct. Despite the emergency situation, Aphrodite blushed at the close contact. She didn't think her first encounter with a blonde would go like this. Her heart skipped a beat when she felt his strong arms wrapped about her slim waist, bringing her closer to him. She wanted to know what he was thinking at the moment, but her resolve to make their relationship real stopped her from reading his thoughts. For now, Aphrodite will melt into his embrace. It felt so protective and so warm, it made her think that even fate couldn't do them apart. Tragedy struck each time she found the man of her dreams. But his aura reassured that everything would be alright. Even without her power, she could feel his concern for her being, although she was just another stranger for him. The feeling of it was great. Despite being a bit too hastily, Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, love and lust, had felt her heart flutter again. Thanks for watching this video. Part 1 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.